As we find ourselves wired and unable to sleep, more and more of us are turning to drugs to knock ourselves out, whether it's melatonin or alcohol or Ambien. 9 million Americans, 4% of adults, are using prescription sleeping pills, and vastly more are using over the counter sleep aids, like I did for many years. But Roxane told me bluntly, if you chemically induce sleep, it's not the same kind of sleep. Remember, sleep is an active process in which your brain and body do lots of things. Many of these things don't happen or happen far less in drugged or drunk sleep. The different ways of artificially inducing sleep can have different effects. If you take 5 milligrams of melatonin, which is often a standard dose that's sold over the counter in the US, Roxane said you risk blowing out your melatonin receptors, which would make it harder to sleep without them. Bigger effects kick in with the harder stuff of Ambien and the other prescribed sedatives. She warns sleep is a really important balance of many neurotransmitters, and if you artificially pump up once, it changes the balance of that sleep. You will likely have less REM sleep and fewer dreams, and so you lose all the benefits that come from this crucial stage. You are likely to be groggy throughout the day, which is why sleeping pills increase your risk of death from all causes. You're more likely to get into a car accident, for example, if you ever had surgery and recovered from that, like coming off anesthesia. Roxane said, you don't say, oh, I feel so refreshed. Knocking yourself out is like taking a mirror anesthetic. Your body doesn't rest and clean and refresh and dream like it needs to. Roxane told me that there are some legitimate uses for sleeping pills. For example, taking them for a short time after you've had a traumatic bereavement might be sensible. But she warned it's definitely not the solution for insomnia. And that's why doctors are not supposed to prescribe them over the long term. It's a sign of how dysfunctional we have become when it comes to sleep that the people who should be warning us most about this crisis, doctors, are in fact required to become sleep deprived to get their qualifications. As part of their medical training, doctors have to do grueling 24-hour shifts on call. They nickname it doing a Jack Bauer after the TV show 24, where Kiefer Sutherland can't sleep because he's chasing terrorists. This endangers their patients, but we have become a culture where even the people who should know best about sleep fetishize staying sleepless beyond the point of reason, just like the rest of us. The second question I found myself asking was, given that lack of sleep is so harmful, and at some level we all know it, why are we doing it less? Why would we give up on one of our most basic needs? There's a big scientific debate about this, and several factors seem to be having an effect. Some are going to come up later in this book. One of them, unexpectedly, is our relationship with physical light. Charles made some of the key breakthroughs on this. Until the 19th century, the lives of almost all humans were shaped primarily by the rise and fall of the sun. Our nature rhythms evolved to match it. We would get a rush of energy when it got light, and we would feel sleepy after it got dark. For almost all of human history, our ability to intervene in this cycle was pretty limited. We could light fires, but that was it. As a result, humans evolved to be as sensitive to changes of light, Charles says, as algae and cockroaches. But suddenly, with the invention of the electric light bulb, we gain the power to control the light we are exposed to. And this power has started to scramble our internal rhythms. Here's a clear example. We evolved to get a rush of energy, a surge of waking drive, Charles says, when the sun began to set. This was very helpful to our ancestors. Imagine you're out camping and the sun starts to fall. It's very useful if you then feel a rush of wakefulness, because then you'll be able to set up your tent before it's too dark to do it. In the same way, our ancestors got a fresh rush of energy just as the light waned, so they could safely get back to their tribe and finish the things they needed to do that day. But now we control the light. We decide when sunset happens. So if we keep bright lights switched on our right until the moment we decide to go to sleep, or we watch TV on our phones in bed, when we switch them off, we accidentally trigger a physical process. Our bodies think this sudden warning of the light is the arrival of sunset, so they release a rush of fresh energy to help you get back to your cave. Now, this surge of waking drive, instead of happening at 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon before the sun sets at 6, is now happening at 10, 11, midnight. Charles says you have the surge of waking energy at the time you're deciding whether to go to sleep. Now you get up in the morning. You feel like you're going to die. You swear to God that you're going to get more sleep the next day, but you're not tired the next evening because you've watched more TV on your laptop in bed and triggered the same process all over again. The surge is very powerful, and so people are like, I'm fine, and the morning is a blur that they've forgotten. Charles believes that, as he said to another interviewer, every time we turn on the light, we are inadvertently taking a drug that affects how we will sleep. This goes on day after day. That's a major contributing factor to this epidemic of sleep deficiency, because we are exposing ourselves to light later and later, he explained. Indeed, 90% of Americans look at the glowing electronic device in the hour before they go to bed, triggering precisely this process. We are now exposed to 10 times the amount of artificial light that people were exposed to just 50 years ago. I wondered if one of the reasons why I slept so much better on Cape Cod was because I returned to something closer to this natural rhythm. When the sun sets on Provincetown, the town gets much darker, and by my beach house, there was almost no artificial lights, barely even a street lamp. The orange haze of air pollution that lights up the sky in every place I have ever lived was gone, and there was only the gentle light of the moon and the stars. But Charles told me you can only really understand our crisis of sleep if you understand it in a much bigger context. At first glance, he says, what we are doing is crazy. We wouldn't deprive children of nutrition. We wouldn't think of doing that. Why are we depriving them of sleep? But it makes a dark kind of sense when you see it as part of a broader picture. In a society dominated by the values of consumer capitalism, sleep is a big problem, he told me. If you're asleep, you're not spending money, so you're not consuming anything. You're not producing any products. He explained that during the last recession in 2008, they talked about global output going down by so many percent and consumption going down. But if everybody were to spend an extra hour sleeping as they did in the past, they wouldn't be on Amazon. They wouldn't be buying things. If we went back to sleeping a healthy amount, if everyone did what I did in Provincetown, Charles said, it would be an earthquake for our economic system because our economic system has become dependent on sleep-depriving people. The attentional failures are just roadkill. That's just the cost of doing business. I only really understood how significant this point was towards the end of writing this book. All this leads to one last big question about sleep. How do we solve this crisis? There are several layers to the solution. The first is personal and individual. As Charles explains, you need to radically limit your exposure to light before you go to sleep. He believes you should have no sources of artificial light in your bedroom at all, and you should avoid the blue light of screens for at least 2 hours before you go to bed. We also need, all the sleep experts told me, to have different relationships with our phones. Roxane told me that to lots of us, it's like your baby, right? So as a new parent, you're like, I've got to be vigilant for this thing. I've got to pay attention. I'm not sleeping as deeply. Or you are like a firefighter who's listening for a call. We're constantly a little tensed to see, did something happen? She says your phone should always recharge overnight in a different room where you can't see or hear it. Then you need to make sure your room is the right temperature. It should be cool, almost cold. This is because your body needs to cool its core to send you to sleep, and the harder that is, the longer it takes. These are helpful and relatively well-known tips, but as every expert I spoke to acknowledged, they are not enough for most people. We live in a culture that is constantly amping us up with stress and stimulation. You can tell people all this and explain the health benefits of a good long night in bed, and they will agree. And then they say, do you want me to list everything I need to do in the next 24 hours? And you want me to spend 9 hours sleeping too? As I learned about several of the things we need to do to improve our focus, I realized that we live in an apparent paradox. Many of the things we need to do are so obvious they are banal. Slow down, do one thing at a time, sleep more. But even though at some level we all know them to be true, we are in fact moving in the opposite direction, towards more speed, more switching, less sleep. We live in a gap between what we know we should do and what we feel we can do. The key question, then, is what's causing that gap? Why can't we do the obvious things that would improve our attention? What forces are stopping us? I spent a large part of the rest of my journey uncovering the answers.